Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video we're back with another cast reaction for Traitors cast. I'll be reacting to the cast of the Traitors Season 3, a cast that I don't know the majority of these people, which makes this a weird season to be doing a cast reaction for. However, again, I did one for Season 2, and to be fair, I mean, there are some really big names from shows I do very much care about, to where that's kind of what's justifying making this video. But straight up, I mean, there are less of those people that I do know than Season 2, and I'll definitely have a lot to say about those specific people. Again, we'll be kind of just rushing through the others. And again, this is a cast I've seen online a lot of disappointment in. I feel like there's a lot of talk about how this is as good as Season 2's, and really for me, I do feel like it's pretty much on par. However, I do feel like something does feel lacking here. Not because the cast itself, to where, again, I think there are some pretty big names. Again, from the sphere of reality television that I personally follow, again, shows like Survivor and Big Brother, you got some massive legends of the game from that side of the cast. For even the people outside that, I still feel like there are some notable figures there, to where, again, to me, this doesn't feel like this massive drop in quality that a lot of other people seem to look at this as, though I do feel like something just feels a bit less special about this cast. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that we kind of expected a good cast, where I think the jump from Season 1 to 2 was really massive. And while, like, from Season 1, again, you had some pretty notable figures there, I feel like with Season 2, I feel like it really took that to another level. Again, having the likes of Dan Giesling, Harvey Shallow, Sandra Diaz-Twine, Janelle Perazina, again, Johnny Banana, CT, and some really massive names from their respective shows, to where with Season 3 here, I mean, to be honest, again, from the likes of Survivor and Big Brother, we still have those massive names, yet again, it was kind of expected that we would get those massive names. And through that, again, I think it does lead to me just being kind of whelmed by this cast, even though I don't think from a pure, genuine quality perspective, it's actually that much difference. But I do think some things to note about this cast are, first, the fact that we did originally think that Davey Rickenbacker might have been on this cast from Survivor David vs. Goliath, who is someone that I was personally very excited to see on. I am very disappointed that he's not on the cast itself, though in itself, it did feel like a very random choice. I mean, the fact that he ends up being an alternate that didn't make it on the show itself, again, kind of makes sense, especially when looking at the caliber of Survivor players that did make the final cut. Though, again, I do kind of hope that Davey eventually gets on the show. I do feel like Davey is someone that would be a perfect fit for the Traitors. Would be a really interesting traitor itself, to where, again, I think Davey was a very inspired choice, where I'm disappointed he didn't make it on. But another thing to note here is the fact that we have no challenge representation on this cast, which is very bizarre, considering the two winners of the previous season were both from the challenge. Now, again, I would not be shocked if someone like Johnny Bananas ends up entering late, which again has already been implied to be an idea that production is thinking about in the past. But still, I do feel like the fact that there's no challenge people here is pretty surprising. Though, to be fair, I think the recent filming of Challenge 40 and the current filming of All Stars 5 probably sapped up a lot of those resources, to where I think it was probably difficult to find anyone for this cast. But the fact that they couldn't get a single person here, I think, is definitely a bit underwhelming. But with that, let's get into the actual reaction to the people themselves. Again, we'll be running through the cast. Where first, again, I'll briefly talk about the people that I don't know as well. Again, we'll end with the Survivor Big Brother people that I obviously know a lot better. Talk more in depth about them, but again, we'll run through these people pretty quickly in alphabetical order of first name, to where first, let's start off with Bob Harper from The Biggest Loser, which, again, fine, I guess. I mean, I know he's a decently big name. I've heard of him. I've seen him before. I don't know much really about him yet. Again, for something like the Traitors, I feel like he seems like a decent pick. Again, kind of a big enough celebrity to where, again, he's at least a somewhat notable name, but also, again, someone that would accept being on the Traitors, where, again, I think Bob Harper kind of makes sense here. Next up, we got Bob the Drag Queen from RuPaul's Drag Race, someone that I had personally never heard of, but I hear a lot of really good things about. I think this is someone that a lot of people are very excited for, and just in general, I am very into the idea of putting more drag queens into these other shows, to where, again, now that we have a lot of reality shows that are taking from other casts, again, shows like The Traitors, but also things like The GOAT, House of Villains. I do like having more drag race representation there, even though, again, it's not a show that I personally have gotten into. Yeah, I think having more representation for that community is always cool. And again, I hear that this is a very inspired pick, someone that people are excited for. So again, I'll be interested in seeing how this plays out. Next up, we got Chanel Ayan, the first of the billion housewives on this cast, where obviously there's going to be a lot of housewives. I mean, Housewives is the flagship show of Bravo, again, a channel owned by the same company that owns Peacock. Again, it's not a shocker that they would put all these people here. And Chanel is someone that I've heard okay things about. I mean, it doesn't seem like she's someone that the Housewives community is like super upset over, yet also someone that I believe is relatively new to the scene. So again, I don't really have many opinions on her outside the fact that I think if there is a housewife that becomes a traitor on this season, I think she might be the person I'm looking at as the most likely to do so, where none of the others feel particularly likely based on what I've heard, and her feeling like someone that could be someone that they're trying to propel to become the star of the show, to where, again, I feel like she is someone that I'm looking at as a potential traitor here. Next up, we got Chriselle Strauss from Selling Sunset and Dancing with the Stars, and I've heard of her before. I believe she is a Big Brother fan from what I remember, to where, again, she's at least experienced in this reality TV sphere, to where, again, I think she's fine. Again, I think it's a decent pick here. Again, I think it's better to get someone that's knowledgeable of these other players than someone that isn't. So again, like, I think it's a fine pick. I don't really know much actually about her, but again, not that fussed over to pick either. Next up, we got Sierra Miller from Summer House, and I genuinely have no clue who this person is. I don't know this person, never seen this person in my entire life. Maybe they'll be good, maybe they'll be bad, who knows. Next up, moving on to another of the housewives, we got Dolores Catania, who I've heard is pretty boring. I feel like that's kind of the vibe I get from seeing people's reactions to her, to where I don't feel like anyone's particularly excited to see her. But again, another housewife that made the cut that, again, just feels like them trying to bloat out the cast of housewives because they're trying to promote their own properties. Next up, moving on to Dorinda Medley, who I've seen a little bit more support for, where I've heard that this person's very messy, and the fact that they can get into some drunk fights, to where, again, I've heard some decent things from a TV standpoint about this person, though I also, again, don't know anything about them. And again, it's just another housewife to me, where, again, maybe they'll be good, maybe they won't. Next up, moving on to one of the more random picks on the board, we got Dylan Efron, the brother of Zac Efron. I guess that's enough to be on this cast. I mean, to be fair, obviously last season we had Marcus Jordan on the cast, who was such a random pick at the time, again, being just the son of Michael Jordan, which, again, to be fair, he was also dating Larsa. Again, there were more reasons to cast him. And to be fair, I like Marcus on that season. I thought he was a good casting choice by the end of it, but Dylan Efron seems so random here. I really don't know why he's here, but again, I know that the Traitors are trying to cast more pseudo celebrities, to where, again, this kind of fits the bill. Next up, moving on to Gabby Windey from The Bachelorette, and I definitely know this person, aka I don't. Who is this person? So where I've seen like mixed things about this person. I've seen some people be like very upset that she's on. I don't know if that's because they just don't like her. I don't know if it's because she brings bad TV. Again, I genuinely don't know. I do feel like from a Bachelor standpoint, we've gotten a lot of men on recent Traitors seasons, to where I think getting someone from The Bachelorette, I think, is a bit more interesting here. Next up, moving on to Lord Ivar Mouthbatten, British royal. Again, random, but I think it's fine. Again, like, we had John last season, who was so random there, and obviously I think this is their attempt to have another John style figure, to where, I mean, sure, if John wasn't there last season, I would think this is the most random pick on the board, but considering the fact that, again, I think John was there, I think they liked what John brought to the show, I would assume Ivar here is, again, their kind of attempt to just redo that, to where, again, it'll be interesting to see how it goes. I don't really know much about him and his personality, but again, it should be interesting either way. Next up, we got Nikki Garcia, aka Nikki Bella, who I had known before. Again, I'm not a big wrestling guy, however, I've heard her name before. I feel like I've seen things that she's in, to where she's a bit messy, to where I feel like she's someone that is willing to get into confrontations. I feel like she's someone that could be a fun presence on this season. I do also think, again, her being a wrestler, I think, is something we haven't seen on the Traitors US up to this point, where, again, I think it's an inspired casting choice. Again, don't really know too much about her yet. From what I do know, I do feel like she was a decent pick here. Next, I'm moving on to Robin Dixon, the last Real Housewife on the cast, and I know nothing about her, and supposedly she sucks and is boring, and she just got fired from her own show, to where, why is she here? So again, I don't think we're getting much from her. I definitely see some like charade potential of her just being kind of purple on the show. But again, I do feel like this is just kind of a random pick from what I understand. Next, I'm moving on to Sam Asghari, who I had seen this name before, and I was wondering why. It turns out he's the ex of Britney Spears, which is like, also why? Again, fits in line with these like pseudo celebrities that are related to a much bigger celebrity. I mean, I know nothing really about him. I don't expect much from him, but again, who knows? Maybe he ends up being the next like Pilot Pete and someone that you don't expect to be a major character, but then ends up really standing out in the show. But again, I'm not really expecting it here. Next, I'm moving on to probably the biggest name from a more pop culture standpoint on this list. And that is Tom Sandoval, who, again, I don't watch Vanderpump Rules, but I know of him. I do know that he was obviously this very controversial figure where he's kind of a dick, and also he cheated on his significant other, and that became this big controversy. And again, I know of him. I'm not expecting much from him. Where, again, I don't think he's someone that is probably meant for this game. But again, who knows? Again, he might be the next Peter Weber. He might just be a complete dud. We will have to see. And the final person, again, I don't know particularly well, is Wells Adam from The Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise. And also, I believe, married to Sarah Hyland, which is so random. But I've seen mostly positive things about him. I feel like people mostly like him. I haven't really seen many negative comments about him, again, in comparison to a lot of other members of the cast. So where, again, it seems like he's a well-liked figure within his respective community, to where, again, maybe he'll be good, maybe he won't. I genuinely have no clue. But either way, that's all the people I don't know particularly well in the majority of the cast. Now let's get into the 6 people that I do know very well. This is genuinely a very exciting portion of the cast. Again, I think for me, these 6 people are truly elite casting choices for the most part. I think there's maybe one question mark, but still, all people I'm very, very excited to see on the Traitors. I think this should be a very fun ride. So let's start off with the Big Brother players. I think both of these are fantastic casting choices. We got started off with Brittany Haynes, who had been rumored for a while. And again, I think Brittany is a perfect pick for this show. I think she is someone that provides some great commentary along the way. Again, she is obviously well known for being one of the best people in the DR, and I feel like she is going to easily provide that on this season. For again, she also showed that she hasn't lost a step in her last appearance on Reindeer Games, to where, again, I think as a whole, Brittany, very inspired pick. I think someone that could also do very, very well. I think Brittany is someone that I am very much looking at as a potential traitor. I think someone that would probably excel even more being an initial faithful and then transition to a traitor midway through. So I feel like if that is the case, I feel like that is definitely a recipe for a Brittany win, which again, I think would be a very interesting ride, to where again, I am having pretty high hopes for Brittany here. Excited to see her here, but also very excited for the next person. Again, I am mind blown this person's on the Traitors. I'm so excited for Danielle Reyes. And obviously we just saw her in Reindeer Games, which even that was very surreal. But again, with that being a more competition-based show, I feel like it didn't really fully scratch the itch of seeing Danielle Reyes back. I think this will more so be that. Again, seeing Danielle Reyes, again, in a game where she has to lie and manipulate. And again, this could be a really fun ride. I do worry that if she is a traitor, that should be a bit too obvious of a traitor, where I think she's someone that is very well known for being this Big Brother villain, to where if people do know who she is, I do wonder if she is someone that would be called out right away, to where I do worry for that. But I do feel like Danielle Reyes, again, I am very excited to see her here. I think she definitely has the skills to be a traitor. I think she also continues to show that she can provide good TV. Again, she was really good at playing up the villain in Reindeer Games, to where, while I think it did get a bit hammy at points, I do feel like she still is an incredible casting choice here. And I think seeing her dynamic with Brittany Haynes will be really interesting after Brittany betrayed her in Reindeer Games, to where I think that would be an interesting dynamic, along with the fact that she is also a massive Survivor fan. And seeing her interact with the likes of Boston Rob and Tony and Jeremy is going to be also very insane, to where, again, I am excited to see Danielle Reyes here. Amazing casting choice here. But with that, let's now transition to Survivor, where with recent seasons, we have been primarily focusing on the women of Survivor. I mean, season 1, we got Suri and Stephanie. Season 2, we got Parvati and Sandra. Here, we're getting a lot more men, but I think the men that they did pick are very strong. Also, the massive legends of the game. However, we're going to be starting off with the only woman from Survivor that made the cast, and that person is Carolyn Weiger. And this is such a random pick to me. I'm just kind of genuinely surprised that Carolyn is here, where you would think that she would be waiting for Survivor 50 to make an appearance on another show, where she's pretty much a lock for that if she wants it, to where I don't know how the contracts necessarily work, to where I don't know if this would potentially stop her from being on 50, to where, again, you would think that she would pick 50 over this. Though, again, I think most likely she'll probably still be allowed to be on 50, but I think it's weird that she accepted this show in the lead up to 50, which, again, she'll more than likely be on. Before the rumors that obviously came out that she was on the cast, I never once had a single iota in my brain thinking that Carolyn was going to be on the Traitors. And I think she is the one person from Survivor and Big Brother that I'm the most questionable about. But obviously she does have a big legacy. I mean, she is essentially the face of the new era, someone that Probst constantly talks about as being this person to inspire people to play. And I think in general, again, is someone that is a very big name for a modern Survivor player, but also one that I don't feel like we need to see on the Traitors. Again, she's going to be a fun personality, and she always is a fun personality. She's a kooky character, and one that also, again, has this game savviness to play the game. However, I feel like her skill set is not suited for the Traitors. Again, I feel like this, actually, really, I feel like the Traitors kind of is a double negative for her. I feel like both sides of the game are not particularly favorable to her. And again, I would love to be wrong. I would love to see her go on the show and just dominate the season. Yet, again, based on my current read on Carolyn, I think from a faithful perspective, I don't think she's going to gel particularly well. I do feel like she's going to struggle blending in with the house. And I feel like many of these other players in here are not going to gel with Carolyn, to where mixing that in with how no one really took Carolyn seriously on her original season, to where, while I do think, again, she does have decent reads at points, no one really listens to her when she has those reads. People just kind of ignore her, and again, just think of her as this kooky, crazy figure in the game, to where, again, I do worry that's just going to be what happens again here. Now, obviously, people know that she is a more strategic figure after watching the show itself, but how many of these people have watched the show? Or while I'm sure the likes of like Boston Rob and Tony and Danielle Reyes and people like that will know who she is and will adjust accordingly, I don't know if many of the other people, like the housewives or some of these bachelor people or any of those other people, will know who she is, to where I do worry for Carolyn in that light. And again, from a traitor perspective, I don't know if Carolyn would be that good of a traitor. Now, she was able to lie about her idol for the entire road, though even then, again, that's the spot where Jam Jam knew that she was lying the entire time, to where, again, I'm not sure how good of a traitor she'll be either, to where, again, I'm just kind of conflicted on Carolyn. I do think she's a weird casting choice here, though, again, if you're getting someone from Modern Survivor, I can get it why she's here, but I also feel like she's not someone that's suited for the traitor. She's someone that just doesn't really feel like she fits with the show, to where, again, I'm just kind of surprised that she's there. With that, again, we're now getting to the big legends of Survivor. So I'm super excited about. First up, we got Jeremy Collins. And again, I'm so excited to see Jeremy on the Traitors. So again, I didn't think this was even in the cards, where while I do think he was someone that could definitely get the call, I never really expected him to be a pick on this season, to where I think I expected a handful of other players over him. But again, I'm excited that Jeremy is here. I think Jeremy is probably the biggest threat to win this season in my eyes, to where I feel like Jeremy is someone that could be a very good traitor, someone that goes under the radar, someone that no one's really suspecting, to where, to be fair, I do think he'll probably have trouble getting to the tail end of the game, because I feel like there's got to be a point where if he is a traitor, they'll suss him by the end. But still, I think someone that is going to be a very good traitor. I do worry as a faithful, though, where Jeremy, again, as good of a player as Jeremy is, I feel like his reads have never been his strong suit. I do feel like he has some pretty questionable reads at points. Again, the fact that he wasn't able to pick up on the fact that Kimmy was after him at Final Six, I think is a pretty bad read, to where he had to be convinced by others that she was, to where, again, I think Jeremy is someone that I don't know how he's going to do as a faithful, but I could see him being like the CT style figure, someone that is, again, very affable. People don't want to murder, person that people feel like they need to keep around, do the challenge strength, and someone that, again, I think could navigate through the game pretty smoothly as a faithful, despite the fact that I don't think he'll be a particularly good detective, to where, again, I think Jeremy is very well suited for this season, someone that's in a pretty good spot in this season, especially considering he has pretty good relationships with the other two people we're about to be talking about, and is also the lesser threat of those three, to where, again, I think Jeremy is a pretty good pick here. Next up, we're having someone that I thought was a shoo-in for this cast, and I was actually shocked the fact that this person wasn't rumored for longer, considering how open he was and wanting to play, and how it just felt like an obvious person to get after the last two seasons, to where obviously we got at Boston Rob. And again, I think it was a shock that Boston Rob didn't come out as a castmate until literally until the day before the cast came out, to where, again, Boston Rob should have been a shoo-in for this cast. I think it's mind-blowing that Boston Rob was even in consideration for not being on this cast, where, well, again, I think people are frustrated the fact that why do we have to get Boston Rob again, because it's on every show. Again, I don't mind it personally. I do think Boston Rob is, again, an incredible TV presence. I think he has this great way of talking in the confessional. I think he knows how to speak to the audience, and with him also, again, being this massive legend of Survivor and someone that could potentially do well in the Traitors, I do feel like he is, again, a very solid casting choice. I do think the worry is obviously his massive threat level. I mean, he is the biggest name on the board. I think everyone is going to know about Boston Rob. Everyone's going to know what a threat he is, where while I do think he can cultivate an alliance around him, he's not going to be able to keep that the entire way. And again, he's just such a prime person to be murdered if he's not a traitor, which again, I doubt he will be a traitor. And even if he is a traitor, I feel like people are just going to know that he could be a potential traitor, to where again, I think it'll be like a Dan situation where people are just going to always be sus of Boston Rob. And again, I just think it's such a tough road for him to win this game. I feel like there's almost no way he really wins the game. I think there's no way people are going to let him get to the very end of the game under the sus of him potentially being a traitor at all times, where again, I think he has a tough road, but again, I think from a casting perspective, I think he is gold here. I think he is the type of person that you want on the Traitors, where while I do see a lot of Twitter being upset at Boston Rob being here, again, for me, he was a shoo-in to be here. Again, he had openly voiced multiple times before this season that he was actively wanting to go in the Traitors. I think the fact that he's here is just not a surprise to me. Next up, we have the final person for the cast here, someone that I am really excited to see. I mean, someone that, obviously, massive legend of Survivor, someone that I have in the past is my favorite character in the history of Survivor, also the best player in the history of Survivor. That person is Tony Vlachos. And Tony on the Traitors here is going to be really surreal. I mean, Tony is someone that I think is pretty skilled for the Traitors. I think is someone that could be a very good detective. I think he will be very good at that aspect of the game. I think he is someone that could also cultivate allies around him to where he can navigate through the game pretty decently. Even though I will say, I do think for a cast like this, I don't know how well he's going to do of people like the Housewives, people like Bob the Drag Queen, people from like The Bachelorette. But again, I think naturally Tony is a very affable figure. Again, in both of his seasons, there's not really a person outside of Tasha that genuinely disliked him. To where mixing that and the fact that he is in this house with two people that he has a good reputation with. We know that he's friends with Jeremy. Obviously, they were friends during Winners at War and even had humorous interactions before that. To where, again, I think he has a very detailed history with the Jeremy. While also, I think he's someone that is definitely going to work with Boss Rob. I mean, really, I think that is the optimal strat for Boss Rob and Tony, is to work together. These meat shields for each other. And again, I think Tony, while before Boss Rob was announced, I did think he was kind of screwed and would be this obvious target taken out first. I actually think that Boss Rob is there. It's actually kind of a benefit to him. I think the worry here, though, is that he's always going to be playing like he plays in his lead up to Tribals, where I think something that's a bit understated about Tony is that obviously people do remember Tony as this very paranoid player that's very frantic in the game. However, that really only occurs for Tribal. And really outside that, again, he is a very affable social figure and does a lot of good work in like lowering his threat level. I think the issue here with the Traitors is the fact that you pretty much always have to be on. And I feel like with that, I do worry if Tony's going to overplay. I feel like he's always going to be in this spot where he feels like he's in danger and is going to have to play in this frantic way, to where I do worry if a cast like this in particular, where half the cast is essentially people that don't know what they're doing. I do think that Tony is someone that could overplay in that spot, but again, I do think someone like Boss Rob is a bigger target than Tony. Or again, I think it gives him a little bit more leeway as a faithful, even though I do think at the end of the day, he is someone that is not particularly well poised to do well, where again, I think he's in a similar spot to Dan, where I think people are going to be wary of him, and I very much doubt he'll make it to the tail end of the game. And straight up, I do think Tony is very likely to be a faithful. I'll be pretty surprised if he is a traitor, though if he is a traitor, I think he could do very well as a traitor. Obviously, he is a cop. He's obviously a master at making up lies, like we saw in Survivor, and these big plots, to where, again, I would expect him to do well as a traitor, again, as long as he doesn't really overplay his hand, which is definitely possible. But again, as a whole, I'm very excited to see Tony on this cast. I think he's someone that will bring great TV, even though, again, who knows how long he'll be there for, but someone that I do think is a pretty great casting choice for a show like this. But with that, that is the entire cast of The Traitors Season 3, which, again, I will be doing a review of whenever the season comes, where, again, the tradition is that it airs in January. I have a feeling that this will air a little bit earlier, though, again, you never really know. But again, whenever it does, I'll do a review of it, to where, again, I'm assuming it'll be a fun ride. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.